Hello guys, welcome to a new video, and this is going to be a video that was requested by a lot of you from YouTube video comments, from the stream and things like that, and it's all about patch 8.2. and basically a lot of new people are coming into this game. There's a lot of people who are returning and they're kind of wondering which class is going to be good, whether you're going to be DPSing, tanking or healing, and which class is going to basically give you the most return for your time investment. So this video is going to be looking at classes that are relatively, or at least perceived to be easy. And keep in mind, disclaimer straight away, a lot of the classes are relatively easy to play in World of Warcraft. A lot of the times classes that are easy still require a lot of mastering to play them well in high end. But this video is going to be looking at classes that are, let's say, rotationally easy, but also perceived to be very good at like Mythic Plus, very good in Mythic raiding content. Whether you're going to be returning for the game as a complete beginner, these classes will give you good numbers in terms of healing, in terms of tanking, in terms of DPSing, but also down the line you might want to push yourself, and these classes will help you achieve that, or at least these classes are capable of doing that. First of all, let's look at the parameters that I'm going to use to determine whether the class is easy or beginner friendly. First of all, the ease of rotation. If a class has a relatively easy rotation, it means you have more time to, kind of look at boss mechanics, pay attention to what's going on, meaning that you probably will die less. Second parameter, mobility. And mobility is going to be covering things like, can you do your full DPS rotation on the move? And I'll talk about this later on when I'm going to be talking about best range DPS, because this video is going to be including tanking, melee DPS, range DPS, and healers. So we'll talk about that later on. But also things like getting from A to B the fastest. Because a lot of the times if you can dodge stuff easier, you're going to die less, your DPS is going to be increased and things like that. And the last parameter is going to be community perception. Because I know a lot of the new players coming in, they have been, or at least they were subjected to community perception. If you're playing a class, even for these plus 10 keys, if you're playing a class that's deemed to be unviable, you might not even get an invite, and it's going to be really hard for you to push those Mythic Plus keys or get better gear. So that is going to be a parameter in this video, because that's how crazy community perception has gotten. Let's look at tanks, and honestly this section is already scuffed already, because I thought a lot about the tanks. I thought about which tank is going to be the easiest to play, which tank is going to be strong for Mythic Plus and raids, and honestly I cannot decide, because there has been a lot of changes happening in 8.2. Some of the tanks got nerfed, some of the tanks got buffed. All the sudden community perception is still kind of staying the same. There's a lot of people still playing Protection Warriors in high-end content, and I kind of wanted to say Guardian Druids, because I feel Guardian Druids, their rotation, or at least in order to play a Guardian Druid for Mythic Plus or raids and things like that, it's not very difficult. You have a lot of uptime on your damage mitigation. You're kind of a meat shield of a tank, and I feel it's not really hard to play a Guardian Druid in this lower end content. But at the same time, if I look at the community perception, I still don't feel that Guardians are emerging as a really good Mythic Plus tank, at least not yet. They haven't been used in a lot of the raid content, so I don't feel there is a one tank spec that's gonna give you everything at this moment. If I were to recommend a tank, I think Brewmasters are emerging really well in Mythic Plus content. If you look at some of the graphs here, you can see Brewmasters are being used or perceived as like the second best Mythic Plus tank for really high pushes. It's also probably the most popular tank used in the World Forest race, where a lot of these top end guilds are using double Brewmaster tanks for a lot of boss fights, but that is the high end content. And Brewmaster to some extent is considered to be a relatively hard tank to play, at least optimally. So honestly, tanking section completely scuffed. I don't have a clear winner here. I would kind of recommend, in terms of ease of play, maybe Guardian Druid. You have your battle res, you're a meat shield, you provide enough utility to do those low end content keys, but at the same time community perception might not be there. And if you pick up a Brewmaster, I feel you could do well in Mythic Plus and raids at the same time. So take your pick. No clear winner in the tanking section as of yet. Now, if you look at the melee DPS, completely opposite here. There is one spec that completely dominates in terms of what this video is all about. A beginner class that is good at DPSing, a beginner class that is good at mobility, that is good at survivability, provides enough utility, good for Mythic Plus, good for raiding, and that is Havoc Demon Hunter. Havoc Demon Hunter has been strong for such a long time. If you look at some of the compositions in Mythic Plus, you'll notice that Havoc is one of the most popular melee DPS specs in the game right now. If you look at the rating, Havoc, no matter how bad Havoc is gonna perform, even though if you look at some of the DPS numbers in Warcraft logs for some of the heroic, for some of the mythic content, you notice that Havoc is one of the top DPS in mythic raids right now. You'll still have to bring at least one Demon Hunter because they bring 5% magical buff. And a lot of the times Vengeance is not really gonna make an appearance in the top end raids. So Havoc, or at least a guild, will have to have at least one Havoc Demon Hunter in the melee team. So again, a mandatory raid spot, good DPS in raids, very good community perception in Mythic Plus content where Havoc is kind of dominating in terms of the melee DPS alongside with Rogues. But I feel Havoc rotational simplicity is far better than the Rogues themselves. If you consider the Havoc Demon Hunter rotation, a lot of their single target abilities are also used in their AoE rotation, I-Beam, OP. So you can see that Havoc already can be considered as one of the best beginner DPS classes and also one of the best DPS classes in the high end as well. The only downside of Havoc Demon Hunter right now is that there is 7 billion of them out there. It is one of the highest played classes in the game and you need to separate yourself from the herd. And that can be very hard, but overall, it is a very strong class, a good class for beginners and good class in the high-end raiding and Mythic Plus content. Now, if we look at range DPS, and I kind of have to talk about what makes a range DPS easier here, because I feel there's a lot of range DPS classes that can be contenders for this easiest, best beginner spec. Mobility is going to be a big factor that's gonna determine which spec I'm going to include here. So I'll take my Balance Druid as an example. A lot of the beginner range DPS players fail at movement. So let's say I'm casting, building my resources, astral power and things like that, and there's going to be a movement phase where maybe I need to move out of fire, maybe I need to dodge something, or maybe I need to soak something. So all of a sudden, as an experienced player, you'll be able to build up your astral power, you'll be able to kind of wait out, you know there's going to be movement in the next 2 seconds. And then you have to dodge. All of a sudden I can use my Star Surge or I can reapply my dots and I'm going to be locked out of the global cooldown. Global cooldown is going to be depending on how much haste you have, let's say 1 second. So all of a sudden I can be doing my full damage rotation, I can use my DPS spells, and for that 1 second that I'm locked out in that global cooldown, I can move and soak or dodge fire or whatever without losing any DPS. A lot of the times elemental shamans might be using frost shock when they have to move and things like that. So if you're an experienced range player, you can do that without losing any DPS whatsoever. A new beginner player will probably fail at this, and all of a sudden they might be in the middle of a cast and they have to dodge something and they lose that cast completely, so they lose a lot of DPS. This is why I mentioned Beast Mastery Hunters as the best beginner class for range DPS players, because they can do the full rotation on the move, meaning that they won't lose any DPS while they move, which means that during heavy or like really hard fights, they can kind of pay more attention to what's going on in terms of boss mechanics rather than paying attention to their actual rotation or making sure to optimize their DPS on the move. So all of a sudden, this is why I mentioned Beast Mastery Hunters, because their community perception in Mythic Plus, actually range DPS perception in high-end Mythic Plus is quite good. A lot of that, you can see the chart here, even in 8.2, a lot of the range DPS are kind of equally represented in high-end Mythic Plus. You notice that a lot of Beast Mastery Hunters are being used in this world first race in Mythic raids. So all of a sudden, Beast Mastery Hunter can do or perform full rotation on the move. The rotation is not too bad, and also their community perception in Mythic Plus and raids is very decent, and this is why I mentioned Beast Mastery Hunters here. And I'd love to hear your opinions about this, because I'm sure a lot of Beast Mastery Hunters might want to disagree with this. Let me know, guys. This is my personal opinions, I'm not always right. So this leaves the last spot, and that is going to be a healer. So now I play a healer, I play a lot of the healing specs. I have talked about easiest healers before, and I have to mention that one of the best beginners class right now has to be Mistweaver Monk. Now, I covered things like ease of play. Mistweaver Monk, a lot of their healing abilities are smart heals, or at least handled by the game themselves. You'll notice Essence Font is handled by it. Renewing Mist is going to jump from a target when it's fully healed. When you Vivify someone, it's also gonna splash onto the Renewing Mist target. Renewing Mist is gonna jump from a target that's full HP. So you can see basically straight away a lot of the Mistweaver rotation is handled by the game, and I feel that makes Mistweaver quite an easy healer to play, at least at lower end content. Now let's look at the community perception in 5-mans, community perception in raids. Now in 5-mans, I would consider Mistweaver as one of the top end healers in Mythic Plus. They might not be as good as Resto Druids, or at least people might not perceive them to be as good as Resto Druids, but I feel that Mistweaver single target healing is extremely strong. In raids, or at least if we look at heroic raid content, and I'll talk about heroic raid content because a lot of the people who might be watching this video will only be looking at heroic raid content, and you can see that the easiest healers to achieve good numbers, at least from the heroic logs, are Mistweavers and Holy Priest. And I could have included Holy Priest in this section, but I feel Holy Priest community perception in 5-mans is absolutely abysmal, and it's going to be hard to get invited as a Holy Priest in Mythic Plus, even plus 10 keys. Community perception needs to change. But either way, that's why I mentioned Mistweavers. You can do or generate a lot of HPS numbers if HPS is important to you. In raiding content, in Mythic Plus, you can do a lot of good healing as well. But hey, MadSkillz, Mistweavers have a lot of mana issues. I run out of mana, it's a relatively hard class to play. There are a lot of essences right now that can provide a ton of mana back. I know the fact that Mistweavers will probably be using the PvP essence, Wave the Crane, that's gonna kind of make their rotation a little bit more complicated. If you're having issues with mana in heroic raid contents, just go with the mana essences, just go with the Lucid Dream or ERTS Minor. That's gonna generate a lot of mana. So that's why I mentioned Mistweavers. I feel they're an extremely good beginner's healer. Their community perception in 5-mans is good, community perception in raids is pretty good. Maybe they're not the best mythic raid healers, or maybe they're not being used by that many top end world first guilds, but if you're not looking for that kind of thing, you're gonna do just fine in lower end content. And again, this kind of concludes my video, and I really want to hear your opinions on this. I really want to hear what class I could have included here. I know the tank section was completely scuffed because I don't really have a clear option there, because I feel the game doesn't really have a super easy or easy tanking class that's great in every content. You kind of have to make compromises, but all the other specs that I mentioned, I feel I'm pretty on topic there. I love to hear your opinions, your arguments, your discussions. Again, if you enjoyed the content, please do subscribe. It helps me make these videos. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in my next video.